Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for being here for today's really wonderful BU alumni panel discussion, Unicorns, Narwhals, and Work-Life Balance. Which of these is real? My name is Jeff Murphy. I'm a member of the alumni engagement team here at the university. I'm joined by my colleague Liliana, who I'll introduce in just a second. Today's panel event is offered to our 366,000 alumni around the globe, and of course, all of our current students. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals, and we aim to do this by providing everyone with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. Some of you are joining from some very far away places. Please know that we really do value your participation in this and every program that we offer. Before we really get things going, I have a couple housekeeping notes just as an FYI. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the BU Alumni and Friends website, which you can find at www.bu.edu/alumni. Our panelists are very eager to answer questions you have on this very interesting topic, and you're welcome to submit them throughout our discussion today by using either the Q&A function on Zoom or the chat function. We'll be keeping an eye on both. Type your questions in at any point. We're definitely going to save time at the end to make sure that we get through all of those. Today's event is a unique co-sponsorship with the brand new Terrier Alumni Parents Network on BU Connects. And I'm delighted to have my colleague Liliana, who's overseeing this initiative, join me as a co-host today. And also to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do by bringing Terrier alumni parents together. Liliana, would you mind sharing a little bit about the Terrier Alumni Parents Network and how people can get involved?
Not at all, Jeff. Happy to share some information. The network itself was established really as a way of us engaging alumni who are parents, guardians, or play any kind of caregiving role in the life of the child. The network is a place where you can come to bring your parenting journey. It's a chance to connect with other parents about the ups and downs along the way, to give and get advice, regardless of where it's coming from, whether it's colic or the college tour, to share the joys and challenges of having children. And then perhaps most of all, it's a place where you can come together to develop ideas about how we can help one another enjoy this ride. One thing that we're trying to do is host a number of events throughout the year. Last Friday, the 21st, we had a family fun day at the Fit Rec Center. This December, we will have a holiday party here in the castle. I'm toying with the idea of maybe doing an ugly sweater competition. So get your sweaters dusted off, and we hope that you'll tap in and join us for some of these activities and connect with TAP on the BU Connects network.
If you haven't yet joined BU Connects, it's an amazing platform for alumni, students, faculty, and staff to network, find mentoring, share experiences, and get connected to folks in what they do or what they're interested in. So Liliana, thanks so much for doing this event with me today.
Absolutely.
So let's go ahead and meet our esteemed panel. We've got some of my favorite people I've met in my time at BU. If you don't mind, I think it's much better to ask you all to introduce yourselves. So Leslie, if we could start with you, would you just mind sharing a little bit about you, your BU experience, and what you're doing in life now?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Mikus. I'm VP Talent Leader at Merge, which is an advertising agency that merges storytelling and technology to bring health, wealth, and happiness to the world. I oversee learning and organizational development, which I like to say is the fun part of HR, helping our people grow their skill sets and develop within our agency. I'm a double terrier, proud double terrier. I went to BU for my undergrad, and that's actually where I had my introduction to human resources through several internships that the Career Center helped pair me with. And then from a personal perspective, fast forward a few years, I went back to BU to get my MBA at Questrom and met my husband. We were in the same cohort in the part-time evening MBA program. So you could say it was a great investment to go back to school. Got my MBA, met my husband, and we now have a 2-year-old son.
That's amazing. Leslie, thanks so much for being here today.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Jerry Ballas, you are, let's be honest, my dear friend of 23 years now. You also met your wife at Boston University. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. So my name is Jerry Ballas. I'm a maternal-fetal medicine specialist in San Diego at UC San Diego. So I take care of high-risk pregnancies. I go way back to BU, class of 2000 from CAS and 2002 from the School of Public Health. And yes, I actually met my future wife at the Community Service Center about 25 years-ish ago, roughly 22 years. But then really got to know her studying at Espresso Royale across from Marsh Chapel at studying for the MCAT the first time around 22 years ago. So since then and she graduated 2001. So she is now a pediatric neurologist. We're here in San Diego, and we have our 7-year-old daughter, Violet. And to Jeff's point, I still treasure our band days back in the day. Tokyo Wilma will forever live in my heart.
You weren't supposed to say that.
Things will come out. So and that's us. So 7-year-old Violet, and I'm glad to be here.
Reena, Vokoun, I now consider you a friend as well. You and I have been working together professionally through Boston University for several years. You do some amazing things. Why don't you, if you would, please go ahead and tell everybody about that.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. And yes, you are a dear friend. It's been so great to be working with you all these years with all the BU alumni work that we do. My name is Reena Vokoun. I'm the founder and CEO of a consumer and corporate health and wellness company based in San Diego. And I started this company about 8.5 years ago after working in corporate America for about 16 to 17 years for companies like Google, Yahoo, Reebok, GE, and more. My time at BU is just, I have very fond memories. So I graduated from the COM School, College of Communications, with a Master of Science in Advertising. So I came to BU for graduate school, and my time in Boston literally was, my husband and I got married and moved from San Francisco to Boston within a few days after our wedding. And my husband was across the Charles River at MIT when I was in the part-time evening program at BU, and I was working full-time in digital marketing at Reebok. So very, very fun time. And we have 2 sons. Sean is our older one, who is 15 years old. AJ is our younger one, who is 12 years old. And and we're loving life in California, but staying connected to our universities.
Thanks, Reena. It's great to see you again. And Leslie, I'm realizing Liliana and I are going to have to take you out for lunch so I can count you amongst friends as well, if that works for you.
That works for me.
Awesome. I didn't realize I left this poll up, but this is where I wanted to start. So for those of you that have seen it on your screen this entire time, I apologize about that. But this is the big question, right? Of these things that we titled this event, Unicorns, Narwhals, and Work-Life Balance, how many of you believe that any of these are real things? I'll be honest, I had to double check on the narwhal thing when we came up with the title for this event. But if you haven't already, go ahead, and most of you have, thank you. But if you haven't already, go ahead and tell us which of these you believe are real. I will spill the beans and tell you before I share the results here that we do have somebody who's a believer in unicorns, which I think is awesome. More power to you. We've got almost everybody has responded to this. So let's go ahead and share these results. So this is fascinating. I mean, this is only half of you believe that narwhals are real. I will send you all a Google link after this event is over so you can confirm. But the work-life balance thing, that's why we're having this conversation. Some people have it, some people don't. Some people have it at various points in their lives. But let's start here with our panel. What say you? Is work-life balance a real thing? And Reena, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
So I think, working in the corporate wellness industry now for many years, there are a lot of different terms that you hear. There's work-life balance, there's work-life integration. I think some people don't like to use the word balance because it almost frustrates them. So I definitely understand that and empathize with that. I know all of us on the panel are going to share some of our experiences with work-life balance or a lack thereof. The way that I define it is it's a way to allow your personal and professional lives to coexist in ways that work for you, your your employer or your business and your family. And it's going to look different for everyone, and it's not always going to be on par. There is no perfect balance. I think we all know that. And I think the poll questions also really spoke to it. There's no perfect balance, but how can we really prioritize both our personal and professional lives and our health and well-being? So that's kind of how I see it from my perspective.
Gary or Leslie, anybody want to jump in?
I mean, I think Reena said it perfectly. And Jerry, I know we were talking about this last week, that it's, this harmony that you're looking for. Jerry, I don't want to take your words because you said it so beautifully, not to kick it over to you.
No, and along Reena's point, it's been an evolution of thought, and I think work-life balance is kind of an antiquated perspective on things. I think it's also kind of an immature way of thinking about it. I think it's easy to do when your life is dichotomous, when you go back to being in school or being, an undergrad, and then as you go along, when things start to come into life that you need to be responsible for, that's where it becomes much more nuanced and complicated. So the harmony model is something that a maternal fetal medicine doctor who does a lot of work-life coaching, and he himself is a sensei of a dojo, really brought to our field about 10 years ago. And he broke it down into career, personal, family, community, emotional, financial. These are the kind of components of our lives we deal with day to day, week to week, month to month with our families, to make up what life is, right? And so for me, I think work-life harmony is a lot about honesty, being upfront, being transparent, and just being, really organized in how you approach your colleagues at work, your family at home, your child, your family, your extended family, and so forth. So it's complicated, and I think of it as 6 strings on a guitar, which is complicated to play. But if you get the notes right, you have that harmony. So it's kind of more nuanced than just that teeter-totter balance that we talk about.
What about the majority of professionals in your industry? How do you think they would actually answer this question?
Ooh, I mean, I can speak for the medical community. It's still a struggle. I mean, it is really, and the thing is, we have the data to show how, with the phenomenon of burnout, I think COVID accelerated a lot of realization. I think COVID brought out a lot in terms of the fallacy of work balance. Once somebody's kid's school was closed, you realized, that third wheel in your life that handles childcare for the majority of your day, once that's gone, the wheels come off. And so I think there was a lot of, panic really early on, and has really shown the light on how being able to just say, I'm going to work, and then coming home and things are on the table is just non-existent these days. And, almost to the point, I'd actually argue work-life balance is kind of almost a misogynistic term. I think it was created in a time where a lot of people, mainly men, expect to just be able to go to work, and then they come home and like dinner's on the table and there's my balance, right? And I think it's something that has to be rethought, especially in the medical field. I mean, we are terrible to ourselves, and we're taught that very early in our training, which has to be undone.
Excellent point, Jerry. Please go ahead, Reena.
Yeah, I was just going to say, before my family and I moved to San Diego almost 2 years ago, we were in Silicon Valley, and I spent about 20 years working in Silicon Valley and marketing, sales, and business development. And I definitely experienced burnout myself, as did my husband. And I saw it everywhere with all of my colleagues, that kind of always on culture, working in technology, which is always innovating, put a lot of pressure on people to be, on at all times. And I think to Jerry's point, the pandemic, definitely made it even harder when you're balancing virtual school with your kids and also trying to work. And in particular, I think, and no disrespect to the men here, but I do think a lot of women really face challenges as well in the workplace. A lot of women had to leave the workplace altogether because they just couldn't balance all of the responsibilities that they had. And I think that's unfortunate. And hopefully women can start to, those that did leave during the pandemic can find their way back into the workplace. But it is hard. And I do think that work-life balance carrot that gets dangled over our heads is this elusive concept that doesn't always exist. But I do think there are things we can do to try to, again, make it work for us in our own unique and authentic way. And I know we'll get to that later.
I think from a marketing and advertising industry perspective, what's tough is it's so dependent on the culture of your agency. But even beyond that, it's what clients are you working on and what their campaigns are. You know, you see some of these amazing, like the Super Bowl commercials or these campaigns that involve overnight shoots and things like that. So it's hard to find, you know, what that typical work-life balance is. But the hope is that, you know, that work ebbs and flows and you're not always in pitch mode where all hands are on deck to get something in front of a potential client, and that you're able to then come out of it and go into something that represents a little bit more of balance. But, you know, typically within marketing and advertising, it is quite the go, go, go industry.
And Leslie, I think, you know, we talked about this before. American culture really sometimes can romanticize this. A lot of you touched on this already. You know, the idea that you're not truly successful unless you're really, you know, working all day, coming home, putting your kids to bed, working at night. One of the reasons we asked all of you to join us for this panel is because you're all parents of children of various ages. What are you all doing in your own life to either combat that idea, or do any of you feel like you've just had to sort of embrace that in your career, that we're striving for this life of, you know, being completely dedicated to work at the expense of others?
Yeah, I mean, I have experienced it. I feel like having kids have brought things into perspective, and you know, the hours that I'm able to commit to my job are a little bit stricter because daycare pickup waits for no one. But I also feel like it's, you know, I'm able to take the 4:30 or the 5 o'clock train to get home, do the bedtime routine with my kids. But it is that flexibility. You know, we're talking about work-life balance. My organization is flexible. I'm able to take that earlier train. Do I have to log on later to finish out a few things? Maybe, but that's the give and the take. What I've also found too is, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is I think Jerry talked about transparency and communication and the importance of it. And that's where I've really been able to combat, you know, burning the midnight oil and all of these things. Like my boss is someone who is in meetings all day. And so she works best at night to clear out her inbox, which means my inbox is getting flooded at night. Does that mean the expectation is that I'm to be on and responding? That's a conversation she and I had. And I feel like that's a big element of helping to combat this. And I know we'll talk about that later on, but I have found having these level setting expectation conversations have really helped to combat that, you know, the romanticizing of, you know, bust your butt to get ahead, always be on, even when you're on vacation culture.
So Reena, you've had these varied experiences, big corporate tech firms, entrepreneur and author. Where are you seeing that romanticized? I think we all have this idea that entrepreneurs are maybe some of the biggest offenders in terms of not having work-life balance. How are you, you know, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, you must have read my mind, Jeff, because I was actually thinking about the attempt at work-life balance throughout my life. I sort of see it in, you know, 3 or 4 different stages. My time at BU, you know, going to grad school part-time and working full-time. I remember saying to myself, I hope that this prepares me for working motherhood because I'm having to balance a full-time job and something outside of that. And at the time, a new marriage. And that was 20 years ago now, right? Then I did go into the corporate world and, you know, looking at that, you know, life of tech and digital media, and you know how much we were working all the time. You know, it was a badge of honor to say that you worked 80 hours a week. And you know, I was, you know, working in that industry from the .com bust to the boom first, and then the bust, and then everything that happened after that. And then I went into entrepreneurship, and and had kids in the middle of all of that as well. So I think I have over all of these different stages of my life so far, grad school work, pre-kid, just all work, corporate, and then balancing corporate with a family, and then entrepreneurship in a family has taken me sort of full circle in a way. I naturally am a type A personality and a recovering perfectionist. And so I really, as much as I value health and well-being, and that's a huge passion of mine, and that's what my company focuses on as an entrepreneur, yes, I take it very seriously to practice what I preach. And I think you can get caught up, especially when you are running your own business, that, well, the buck stops with me and I need to manage all of these different cross-functional teams and clients and partners and things like that. And it can be hard. But I think for me, I do go back to what are my values? What are my priorities? Obviously, no matter what I do, my family will always, always come first. And then I put the practices that I, write about and develop programs about into play in my own life. So that is, as Leslie and Jerry said, being organized. I calendar everything in my Google Calendar, whether it's self-care activities, kids activities, what's happening on my husband's schedule with work, my schedule. And then I do think that communication with your employer or your business partners and your family is really important so that everybody's on the same page. And you always, like with my kids, I always want them to know, no matter what is happening, and even if I seem busy, you guys are always the number one priority. And I don't want you to ever forget that. And I'll say, if mom is, if you're feeling like I'm not giving you my 100% attention when you need it, tell me, right? I think you need that communication both ways, because it's never going to be perfect. And sometimes feelings can get hurt on the family side and even on with your team or your manager. And I think it takes being really honest and open about what you need and what they need to come to a good resolution together.
Gary, any other thoughts about this romanticism of crazy work schedules, et cetera?
I mean, I think with medicine or the medical field, the sad part is it gets so ingrained even from undergrad. I mean, you can spot a pre-med most times on weekends. You can tell them from a crowd. You can tell them in the coffee shops and the study halls. Like, it's something that is that has been ingrained into the culture for, I mean, literally centuries, right? And it's that altruism that sometimes I feel is kind of twisted in a way to get the maximum productivity out of someone. And that starts from the pre-med years. There's definitely, I mean, I lived on the pre-med floor at Warren Towers. Do you want to talk about Tinderbox? It was an interesting place. And then that just perpetuates, the med school admission process is not a really welcoming process. And residency, I mean, residency is legendary. We had to have a 80-hour work rule literally put into place, just because that self-perpetuating, altruistic, centuries-old belief of the unbroken, chain of medicine really gets perverted in a way once you even get to your faculty position, because then they change the language to things like productivity, RVUs, how many patients you see in your salary. So all along the way, you literally have to kind of take a step back, look at the big picture, and really realize what's important and start setting boundaries. And I didn't learn that till really late in life. I mean, I was your classic pre-med who just kind of went all out to do well. Residency was rough on my health. There's no way around that. But it really actually took kind of becoming a faculty member, having more autonomy over your time, and then having more say over your boundaries. To Leslie's point about email, there is, everyone knows I'm not going to reply to emails now after 8 o'clock. It's not going to happen. And then weekends, I'll even put away messages on. And really just kind of getting a routine with your family, but your colleagues as well, is really important. Like, people just know that, that's, unless I'm on call, try not to page me. But that unravels at times too. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of eyeing my phone because I have a patient of mine in labor who may deliver at some point in the next few hours. And I kind of promised I'd be there. I have the time, but it's invading into a time that I was not scheduled to work. But that brings me joy as well, that I can be involved in certain things that I can actually request to be part of. So I think that becomes a big part of the whole matrix of it all, is really identifying your boundaries, making them known, and sticking with them.
Well, Leslie, you work in HR, and one might assume helping your firm achieve its goal while allowing for balance for employees must be a concern. In your experience, how have you seen organizations either helping or hindering work-life balances? And I think Jerry just pointed out a few of them. What is Merge doing that is you're proudest of?
Sure. Yeah. Jerry, thank you. You kind of queued me up there. So talking a little bit about, it's the culture that's set at that leadership and managerial level and what the expectations are. Because, your junior level employees, your hardest workers, they're going to be the ones who are online and checking their email, even if they're on the couch, and they want to be available and they're eager to help. But those are the ones that are going to burn out, and you don't want them to burn out because they're your high potentials. So to Jerry's point, those are also the ones who may have difficulty setting those boundaries. They're new to the company, they're new to their careers, and they're eager to learn and to be developed and grow. And so that's why I feel like it's really on leadership and the manager to set the tone and the expectations. And so that's where I see it helping, and that's where I see it being the biggest issue. So when you have them, so if I'm sending emails 9 o'clock at night, I'll either schedule send them so that they don't go through until the next day, or I will preface my note to say, I'm clearing out my inbox. I have no expectations of you looking at this until tomorrow. And one of the things I'm most proud about Merge is that's the expectation. There's this flexibility that's embedded into our culture. And the same for working parents. There's this transparency. We employ the whole person. And so our leaders are telling stories about being working parents and struggling with that. And it's this permission, Reena said, family comes first. And when your organization gives you the permission to disconnect, to take care of that, because the work will still be there, this weight just comes off of you. Just yesterday, I got the daycare call, come pick up your kid. And I had a day full of meetings, and I knew I could reschedule them. I'll catch up on email once my son goes to bed. But this is where my priority is. And my company's giving me permission to do that. And so I feel like, not only is it setting those expectations from digging out of your inbox when you should be online, but it's also what happens when the unexpected happens and employing that whole person.
Nothing, Leslie, stops my heart like seeing my 2-year-old's daycare's phone number come up on my phone during the middle of a workday. I identify with that feeling. My
favorite line is always, "It's not an emergency, she's okay." Like
yes.
Before they even say hello.
Yep. And I feel like so my son just started daycare, and I feel like I'm getting those calls once a week.
Oh,
and
okay,
it's either, yep, great.
I want to acknowledge we're about halfway through our hour here. Some of you are putting some really moving and helpful comments in the chat. So I encourage everybody to take a look at that and keep those coming, please. And also don't forget to, we're going to save some time at the end for your questions for our audience about their work-life balance. So please do take this chance to type a question into the Q&A box or the chat. Reena, this is a bit of it feels like a milestone moment for me, because when I saw that you published your first book, my first thought was putting together a conversation like this today. So congratulations on your book. It's called The Wellness Empowered Woman, Living a Passion Fit Life to Elevate Your Health, Happiness, Family, and Career. I'd be curious to hear what nuggets or wisdom you think are in there about work-life balance, but what inspired you to write the book, and what are you hoping that readers will take away from it?
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. The book was inspired by, I always wanted to be an author. That has been a career dream of mine. And I honestly think the writing classes I took in college and at grad school at BU helped prepare me for this. And it was inspired by the hundreds and thousands of clients that I've worked with through my company, PassionFit. I launched PassionFit, honestly, as a result of, well, it was a lifelong dream because I've always been very passionate about health and well-being, but it also was a result of my own burnout, honestly. The company and even the book, having worked in Silicon Valley, you know, at the time that I left Google to start PassionFit, my kids were, you know, a toddler and a baby. So they were like, you know, 2 and 5, not even. I think they were 1 and 4 actually. And, you know, my husband and the whole first chapter of my book actually is my story. And I talk about the burnout that both of us experienced. And, you know, hearing, you know, all of your stories, you know, Jeff and Leslie with the daycare calls and things like that. I remember that. And I will tell you, it gets that perspective, from that perspective, it gets easier. It gets challenging in other ways. Now we're thinking about the teenage years and peer pressure and college and all of that stuff. So then it becomes more, I think, mental and emotional stress versus some of the physical stress. But yeah, the whole first chapter, it talks about burnout. It talks about, you know, the struggles that my husband and I had of balancing our fast charging careers, because my husband works in tech. He worked for Google at the same time as I did, and he still works there today. So we had from the outside what looked like the perfect setup. Both of us working at Google. Our kids were at the Google daycare. We lived in Mountain View, California, which is where Google is headquartered. So our life was in a 3-mile radius of one another. But I was in a client-facing role, so I was traveling, you know, probably 25% of the time. My husband was traveling, you know, 70% of the time because he was working on a major acquisition for Google at the time. And so it was hard. And so that whole first chapter of the book covers that. I have a chapter that's literally called work-life balance or integration or whatever you want to call it. Leslie, you actually said the title of one of my other chapters, which is called Expect the Unexpected and Get Ready to Fire on All Cylinders. So the book, there's so much about burnout and work-life balance. There's a lot about health and well-being, because that's the cornerstone of the work that I do. Is if you can take care of your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, that is going to help you to succeed and balance, or again, whatever word you want to use, your personal and your professional life. So I just think, yeah, Jeff, you were right on. This topic is something that's very near and dear to my heart. This book is very near and dear to my heart, as is my company and the work that I do, because I just see too many people burning out, too many parents feeling guilt, you know, about not being able to spend enough time with their kids. And I also see the workplace evolving and changing, and we're all still trying to figure out remote work, hybrid work, back in the office, you know, after this pandemic, what does it all mean? And it's gnarly and it's complicated and it's hard, but I think that there is beauty that can come out of it if we all really go back to what we truly, again, you know, believe in, our core values, what our priorities are, and then figuring out what we need to do as a result of that.
Reena, you've done so much for the university. I have absolutely no problem doing shameless plugs for your book. I'm going to send a link to everybody who signed up for this today on where they can pick up the book. But what's your preferred way that people access your book? Where do you want them to get it?
Yeah, so it is available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. You can also just go to the wellnessempoweredwoman.com. That is the book page and my author page, if you want to read a little bit more about it. And even though the title is The Wellness Empowered Woman, I do want to tell you it is for everybody. I've had men read the book. I've had, everybody read the book in different stages of life. And so I do think that it can be applicable. Book number 2 is in the works. And so I just really hope that it could help people. So thank you for that, Jeff. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions at all.
Well, I definitely will make sure that I read book number 1, so I'll be ready for book number 2. Jerry, as parents, we can imagine that your role in managing high risk pregnancies and deliveries is extremely stressful. As you just mentioned, you're waiting for somebody to deliver now, and you can never plan babies. They come when they're ready. You said something about, the quite interesting about balancing, not believing in balance, but in harmony instead. Talk a little bit more about that, about the young professionals in the medical field, and just tell us some more around that harmony.
Well, I mean, I think, and actually, Leslie brought up the point of kind of the young or the newcomers or the most youthful and energetic in a field, sometimes being kind of the on the wrong side of that because they want to be productive. They want to be, and I think medicine sets itself up for that model in a very bad way, just from the very beginning, because you're kind of told that there is no true, medicine comes first, is really one of the first ethos you kind of ingrain in your head, whether it's told to you directly or not. It's the impression you get. And then, medical school kind of hammers that home even more because it kind of takes you out of the world into a very, very artificial environment it's almost like going back to high school, honestly. Medical school, secret is out, is like high school. It brings you back to like this little small group of people. You have very regimented classes. You eat lunch together. There's lunch tables. Like, it's really incredible. And then they set you loose into the hospital. And that's where, again, the hierarchy, the kind of whole theme of it is really kind of drilled down. And so making that change and bringing that change to the profession is going to have to be a grassroots from the very beginning. And it's a hard case to crack, because by the time you get to the point in your career where you can affect or say, I want to affect change, you're knee deep in everything else, family and so forth. So, I think for me, personally, having your interests and hobbies and releases always be present was always a comforting factor to me. So I don't know if Jeff remembers this or not, but I'm a huge comic book fan. I'm a huge comic book art aficionado. I have 5,000 comics here in the room. You can't see over here. And that sounds trite, but that's just an example of something that's carried along with me that I was able to always dip into as part of that kind of recentering and refocusing and reharmonizing that was mine and mine alone. So I always had that kind of me stuff. And I'll even joke with my wife to this point, like, whenever she sees things getting a little out of hand with my collection, or when I'm going to Comic-Con for 4 days straight, I always joke, remember, there's one thing that actually predated you in my life, and that was comic books. And so that's like kind of my me thing. So I always try to have people make sure that they retain and hold on to that. And even I minored in visual arts through the School for the Arts. I originally wanted to do a combined SFA CAS pathway because I really wanted to do comic book art. Submitted art to Marvel Comics from my room in Warren Towers. Like, I was all over it. And so that's how I kind of held on to that for me. And then eventually, when you do start to couple up, or you start to expand your personal life beyond you and your studies, I think it's for me, it's always being, now I lucked out in that my future partner and wife also was medicine oriented, but we were off cycle for years. She worked full time when I was in medical school. She didn't get into med school until I was 3/4 of the way through my residency. And then we had to start over with her being a medical student resident and so forth. And so I had to be upfront with her during med school, for instance, that you're not going to see me for 2 weeks probably before tests and stuff. And I incorporate her into whatever I could socially with my med student friends and med student events and stuff. So again, blending, melding, coexisting, I think is key once you start bringing people into your circle as well. And so I think having your stuff for you that you can value and always kind of grow, and always incorporating and inviting people in and making them part of it is also key. No matter how hard your profession is, everyone's profession is the hardest, in my opinion. Everyone, what they're doing is the hardest. And so the more you can incorporate and introduce and almost desensitize in a way to your way of life, I think really can help. First off, make sure you've got the right person. I mean, that's a big screener right there. And secondly, make sure you set yourself up for long-term success, because kids, they're the ultimate monkey wrench in all of this. They are going to drive out every nook and cranny, and any pathology between the two of you is going to be exacerbated by this little, dependent person. So I think getting all that in order early is very key. If that made sense.
Awesome. It did.
Absolutely. Tanya just made a comment in the chat about their school stopping planning after school events and all the working parents get ruffled. Tanya, I'm going to guess that that might have had something to do with our COVID pandemic. And that's something that came up when all of us were chatting about this event last week, was talking about sort of the before and after of the COVID pandemic. You know, Reena, you had brought up that now we're in this place where organizations are kind of having to demand that workers come back into a shared workspace. I'd be curious to hear from all of you, and I think Leslie, if we could start with you, about what that sort of before and after this introduction of hybrid work schedules that most organizations didn't have in 2020. How has that been for you personally, and also at Merge, the organization you work for?
Sure. So I've been at Merge for, it'll be almost 6 years, so I can kind of paint the picture from before and during and after. Can we say we're after? Are we in the after times?
I don't think so.
Right.
We do have a doctor here. You probably should answer that question.
So when I was recently married in March 2020, so just the two of us when everything went into lockdown. And so when my son was born in April 2021, I feel fortunate that I had a baby. I didn't need to worry about, online learning and all of this stuff. It's a whole different set of challenges to not have a village when you have a newborn, because you're, battling the pandemic. But what I will say is, my husband was working from home full time. So after his paternity leave ended, he was still home, which was such a game changer, and just not something that other, partners get if you're home with your baby on maternity leave, and your spouse, your partner, has to leave to go to work. So that, for me, with how horrible the pandemic was kind of a silver lining in our household. In coming back to work, my husband is now mandated in the office 3 days a week. And so, it's this balance of, okay, so I get to be home 4 days a week. The one day I'm in the office is a nice to have. My Merge has not rolled out a solid come back in on a regular cadence yet. It might be happening, but it's this balance of, okay, who's home and nearby for when the phone rings from daycare to say, come pick up your kid. We're just not comfortable yet with both of us being in the city when we live in the outskirts of Boston. So it would take us more than an hour to get the train to go home and pick up our child. So I think that's something that, from an HR perspective, as organizations begin to roll out these mandates, is these working parents have figured out a schedule that works for them so that they're home when the bus pulls up, or they're able to sneak out to go to the soccer games and all of these things. And it's that flexibility that I think organizations need to keep in mind, because those are things that parents have gotten a taste of that are now going to be non-negotiables in their next job, because they're now able to play a bigger role in their child's life during the workday almost. So that's what I've seen in my personal life and through Merge, and just from an HR perspective, things that we're wary of as we roll out a potential return to work policy.
Jerry, have there been any changes in your and Regina's work life before, during, after the pandemic?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, now my job barely skipped a beat. There really wasn't a way to kind of stop. We changed some appointments to virtual, but like Liliana said, babies come when babies come. So it was really hard. Now my job specifically, I could actually pivot some things to ultrasound by telemedicine, but still a sonographer had to go into work and be exposed. So we really did have to kind of navigate that. Now, in terms of, Violet was home for about a month or so doing virtual, but at that point she was wow, what grade was she in? She was like kindergarten, first grade. So, you know,
Online kindergarten.
yeah, it was an interesting experience. Regina's job was much more able to pivot to virtual, but she was also kind of working three jobs at the same time. She had partial appointments at UCSD, at Kaiser, and she was actually supposed to be going to Oklahoma a week at a time to do inpatient peds neurology when the pandemic hit. So she pivoted to home. And again, too, I think one of the running themes is so much falls on women more so than men. And she took on a lot of the more day-to-day operations. Now, longer term, when an opportunity came for her to pursue a private practice job, one of the big parts is that she's in the other room right now, virtual, that she could be home 2 days out of the week. She works one day and she's off one of the other days. And that allowed her to really kind of feel more comfortable with it. And my job knows that if I need to go, I need to go, and I can pivot anything I need to virtual. Now, the big monkey in the room, though, is always, or the big elephant in the room is, I truly believe in needing a third shift when it comes to parenting. And what I mean by that is always having that kind of independent, standalone third entity in your lives that's going to take off a lot of the pressure with childcare. And for the vast majority of us, that always meant schools, right? Schools are great for educate our kids, but let's be honest, a huge part of school is daycare, right? That's the way the American culture has kind of treated it. And especially as both parents are now in the workforce, it's intensified our need for childcare to be part of school. And I think that's really worn down our teachers, and really comes down to who's going to pay and where does the money come from for these third shifts to help you out. We're lucky in that we have an individual that was our au pair early in Violet's life. She has since gotten married and works independently, but she offers us hours after school to pick Violet up. We pay for that. It's gonna come from somewhere. And so I always, tell parents, you have to plan financially in some way for that third shift if you don't have altruistic parents around or family around. Even if somebody's going to be quote unquote stay-at-home parent, that is not a sustainable model. I've seen many families flare out when they expect one person to be stay-at-home. Then the person comes home from work and that stay-at-home parent has no interest in being involved in anything but a bath and a glass of wine and leave me alone. And that's just not sustainable. So, we've lucked out and been able to find that kind of third person to help, but you pay for it and there's no way around that. And I think, speaking to the bigger point, companies and so forth, in my position as director of wellness in our department, one of my big advocacy points is the administration and the enterprise and the larger beings, they have to start pouring in resources for childcare and childcare resources to their employees. That is what everyone is asking for. Nobody wants happy hours. Nobody wants additional parties. Nobody wants free food in the cafeteria. They want childcare hours that start before 7 and end after 6 in some capacity, because that's what we need. And that's a huge fight.
Thank you so much, everyone. Are there any resources like friends, family, books, or phone apps that you find have been helpful, most helpful? And it's to the panelists, anyone can take it.
Yeah, I would say, I think it's important to find, there, just like we have this Terrier Parents group here at BU, find those parents groups in your companies, right? There's also women at groups. I think about my time sort of pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and after. I know I was advocating for work-life balance and flexibility prior to the pandemic. I actually, when I was in Google, I went to 80%. And the reason for that was because my older son, who at the time was 5 years old, he used to cry every day after school and say, "I want you to be a mommy in the crowd." And I said to him, "What do you mean by that? What is that? How do you define mommy in the crowd?" He goes, "Well, as soon as the bell rings after kindergarten, there's some kids who have to go to the after school program like I do, and then other kids get picked up by their mommies." And I said, "You know what? There are grandparents also picking them up. There's nannies picking them up. Yes, there are moms as well, but I had the worst working mom's guilt at that time. And So I leveraged some of those parent groups and mother, women at groups and mothers groups within the company to help me. But I worked, 80%. So basically I worked 4 days in the office. I worked remotely on Fridays, and I got to leave the office Monday through Thursday every day at 3 o'clock. So I could quote unquote be a mommy in the crowd. And even at that, I was still working until 1 o'clock or midnight every night. And then I left to start my own company. And once I became an entrepreneur, I had more flexibility, but I still had to travel. I still go to speaking engagements and media appearances and conferences. And then when the pandemic hit for all of us, we were, at home, virtual school, like everybody else. Both my husband and I were working remotely, and now coming, hopefully, whatever this is, out of the pandemic or in the next phase of it, I empathize with so many people that are struggling with getting a taste of what it was like, and now trying to figure out how to make it work when they are expected to be back in the office. And I consult with a lot of companies. I speak to a lot of companies. I have a corporate wellness program, and that's one of the biggest things that is up for debate right now. I know in our last meeting last week, we talked about quiet quitting and the great resignation, and for women, the great breakup. So I would say leverage resources like those groups within your companies. There's also, different mothers, groups, especially for new moms. I think that's really important. We have here in San Diego, there's a walking moms group where women get together and they walk with their strollers and talk about, how they're going to handle daycare or nannies, or, it's different stages of motherhood and parenthood. So the biggest thing I would say is find community, because everybody has their own experiences, their own learnings, their own stories to share. And I think that could give you ideas as to how to manage the new normal that we're in. And I will, on my part, continue to advocate in the workplace with all of the companies and nonprofits and different organizations that I work with to find that right, whether it's hybrid, whether it is, remote. I think 5 days in the office is going to be hard for most people after the taste that they got during the pandemic. So my hope is that, we're able to figure it out and give everyone the autonomy to do what works for them. At Google, my husband is in the office 3 days a week, and he works remotely Monday through Friday. And I will say our whole move to San Diego probably would not have happened had it not been for the pandemic, because we were so ingrained in Silicon Valley, and it was hard, especially for my husband, to leave the headquarters. But then when the pandemic happened, and at the time companies became more flexible about where you worked, we had decided we wanted to be closer to family. So for the first time in 30 years now, we live close to my parents, all of my siblings, their kids, their spouses and partners, and we're really lucky. But for the early years of my kids' childhood, we didn't have that support. And we had the daycare calls when your kid is sick. And like Leslie said, you've got meetings and you have to go, who's going to pick them up? And it is stressful. So again, my advice would be community support for sure. There are working parent conferences out there. I know I attended them when I first became a working mother. They'll have speakers, kind of like, panels like we're having today. And I would say the more support and empathy you can find, the better.
Leslie or Jerry, any other sort of resources, tips?
Yeah, one specific one. I know it sounds very specific for physicians, but Regina is actually one of the moderators for the Physician Moms Group. Is probably one of the largest crowdsourcing resources for physician moms. It's got thousands and thousands of members all over, and then there's specific citywide. So if there's any physicians out there, or know any Physician Moms Group has helped us out immensely for anything. All, to Reena's point, things like, simple as, hey, do people want to get a walking group together? To, I just lost my nanny. Anybody have any leads? And these are thousands of people that can come together and answer that. But I think there's groups like that have formed around all industries and at this point. So I think that can really help with at least, that kind of crowdsourced resource. Yeah.
Leslie, you have any quick tips?
And I was going to say, I feel like it's been said, but to Reena's point, finding those employee resource groups within your organization, because these are people who are going through the same thing, or maybe a couple of years ahead of you, and can help give you some direction. I know at Merge, we have a caregiver employee resource group, and which ranges from like, let's share lighthearted first day of school pics to my nanny just quit. Anyway, what do I do? And so to know all of these people we have a common thread, right? We all work at the same agency. We all know advertising. And so, and the demands behind that. And so that common thread helps. Similar to the Terrier alumni parents group, you have that common thread. You're all BU alumni, so you can talk about Warren Towers while life at Warren Towers. I lived in there for 2 years. While
B.
nice. So it's nice just to have that common thread to bring you together and know that you're coming from a similar mindset.
Yeah, and as you know, when Liliana was talking about the Terrier Alumni Parents Network, that's exactly, I think the vision is to provide another place where, you know, folks that have that shared BU experience can also, I know that, you know, I'm not one of the panelists today, but a tremendous benefit for me in terms of work-life balance has been talking with other dads. And so that's why we're all here today. So we have just a few minutes left. I want to end on this. I think it's unlikely that we have any current BU students that have decided to join us for this today. If you are a current BU student, particularly in undergrad, let me know in the chat here. But I want all of you to think, you know, and under the banner, the topic of work-life balance and what you know now, what would you tell yourself if you could go back in time and tell your BU student self, grad student, undergrad, whatever it might have been? What's the one piece of advice you would share with yourself about work-life balance? Whoever wants to go first. I don't want to call anybody out. I know that was like sort of I called an audible here.
I feel like as a type A person, the advice I would give my younger self is it's okay to share the load and to delegate. I'm, you know, one of those people that take all the burden on for myself, and I don't want to burden other people, and to share the mental load, all of it with whether it's your partner or, to Jerry's point, you're outsourcing something. We got a cleaning person to come because I hate that chore, and the mental load, like just the psychological seeing the dust and dirt when you have a toddler, it was worth the investment. And yes, you have to budget for it, but to outsource or delegate, me in college would have been like, yeah, right, I'll do it all.
Reena, you were a grad student at BU, and what are the key pieces of nuggets of wisdom you would share with your younger self?
Yeah, I would say, you know, for me, it was ironic because as much as I, you know, have always valued health and wellness, I've been teaching fitness classes since college, like studied nutrition and, you know, positive psychology and behavior change for fun when I was working in my corporate career, and later parlayed that into what I'm doing now. But even I lost sight of taking care of myself during those hard charging years of grad school and work and in my tech career, and I let myself burn out. So if I could go back, I would tell my younger self that it's not selfish to practice self-care. And especially when you become a parent, I think you know, I totally can empathize and agree with Leslie. I'm a type A too. I don't like to ask for help. You don't want to burden people. I 100% feel you on that, and I get it. And I've also had to learn that hard lesson of, but if you do that and you become depleted yourself, you're really not going to benefit anybody. You're not going to be the best parent. You're not going to be the best employer or manager or leader. And so you've got to get back to how you're feeling, check in with yourself every day, move your body, eat well, make sure you're getting enough sleep, make sure you're finding some form of mindfulness to manage your stress, because you can have burnout creep up on you. And it's something that's like a slow burn that sort of happens over time. And all of a sudden, you know, you're not motivated. It could develop into health issues, and so many other problems can arise. So just remember to practice that self-care, and also look at the early warning signs of burnout potentially coming so you can stop it in its tracks and do something about it before it becomes a bigger problem. And as parents, I think the best thing we can do is model for our children what it means to take care of ourselves and still be productive and successful in our careers, because we don't want to teach this next generation of kids be burnt out and have stress and anxiety and mental health issues. So what can we do for ourselves now, looking back at what we would have told ourselves then, so that we can help the next generation as well?
Jerry, you had a very long terrier career. What's your parting shot?
I would have had Reena go back in time and talk to my pre-med self, because that's pretty much everything I needed to do. I would simply tell him, I'd simply tell him to go out a little more. You will still pass Orgo, you will still pass biochem if you go out with your friends just a few more times in those earlier years. I definitely learned to do that a little more as a grad student. Thankfully, I went to that coffee shop that night. And so I absolutely agree in trying to really get those habits early on. Health is a big one. Mental health is another big one. I wish I learned the benefits of therapy way early in life. And just that ability to find somebody to really kind of be able to talk things objectively and put them out there. So I wish I would have kind of focused on mental health much earlier, because I think a lot of what Reena spoke to and what Leslie speaks to, I think, comes from that. Us trying to protect our own mental health and pathology sometimes hinders our ability to balance our lives. And so addressing them in real time and honestly with an objective observer, I think, is key. But yeah, it definitely would have maybe hit a frat party or two one or more times back in the day, just to kind of maybe open up myself a little earlier.
We've gone over by a few minutes. I think well deserved that we stayed with it. Thank you to those of you that are still here. Liliana, any final thoughts from you about the topic or about the Terrier Alumni Parents Network?
I think we're just grateful that you decided to join us. Thank you so much, Leslie, Jerry, and Reena, for being a part of the conversation, and Jeff for pulling this together. We hope to have more of these, so please tap into the network, make recommendations, suggest topics, pose a poll, challenge your colleagues on, your BU Terriers on the site, and pose a question. So we'd love to hear from you. Thank you again.
This was great, everybody. Thank you so much. I actually enjoyed hearing all of your advice and the obstacles you've been dealing with, and it's great to have all of you here. Thank you again, all of you. If you haven't already, please join BU Connects and then join the Terrier Alumni Parents Network so we can all continue the conversation there. We've got our next alumni career event coming up on May 9th. We're actually going to be offering a session called Unhiding: How to Create an Inclusive Culture that Celebrates Differences. You can sign up for that now on our website at bu.edu/alumni. Thank you, Liliana. Thank you, Leslie, Reena, and Jerry. This was wonderful. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Hope you have a great day or a great evening wherever you might be. Take care.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.